And now it is time to check in with our politics roundtable. Today we have Spiro Amburn, Senior Vice President at McGuire Woods Consulting. He previously served as Chief of Staff for Republican Georgia House Speakers John Burns and David Ralston. Devin Barrington Ward, a progressive community organizer, political activist, and managing director of the Black Futurist Group. And making his Georgia Vote debut, Rahul Bali, politics reporter at WABE 90.1 FM on your radio. He is the co-host of WABE's Plugged In. Governor Brian Kemp no longer running for the race in 2026. How competitive is this primary race going to be for Republicans?
I think it's going to be wide open. I mean, and it's the obvious answer is who jumps into the race. That's going to be but I think it's also going to matter the involvement of both President Trump and Governor Brian Kemp. One of the other things we heard from Governor Kemp at that bill signing was he's talking to President Trump about, the candidates that could be in the race. If you get a candidate that's backed by both of them, that's going to probably make it a pretty uncompetitive primary. But it's really going to depend who jumps in the race. Last week, you guys talked to Secretary of State Raffensperger. He could jump into that race.
Yeah. And Spiro, I want to bring you in on this, get a Republican's perspective. Yeah. Is this shaping up to be a little bit of a President Donald Trump and Governor Brian Kemp primary, where a lot of these candidates are auditioning for their endorsement?
I think to some degree, yes. As Rahul said, I would expect both of them to be involved. It's going to take some time to see how that shakes out. For weeks now, we've been saying that Governor Kemp's decision would be the first domino to fall, so to speak. Well, now that's happened. He's decided not to run, and I expect that he will be active. As he said, he's got a large campaign war chest, so he will continue to be relevant, I think, throughout the remainder of his tenure. But, kudos to Congressman Carter. I mean, he was first out of the gate. He came out charging. But by no means do I think this is going to be a small field. I think you'll see others jump in. Perhaps Insurance Commissioner John King, Secretary of State Raffensperger, Mike Collins, the congressman's been mentioned. So I don't think there'll be any shortage of candidates.
Can a Trump endorsement help or hinder these candidates? We know that Brian Kemp is popular, but Trump,
sure,
among all Republicans, not as much.
Well, I think Trump can help. I think in a primary, certainly right now. But again, we've got 12 months until the primary, almost exactly 12 months, 10 months until qualifying. A lot can change between now and then.
Jon Ossoff is the incumbent. Is this a scenario his team and Democrats across the state were hoping would play out, that Governor Kemp would stay out of this race?
Oh, most certainly. I think folks recognize how effective Governor Kemp has been at campaigning, whether you agree with his policies or not. He beat Stacey Abrams twice, and she's a powerhouse. And so I think folks over on the Ossoff camp are probably breathing a sigh of relief. And I think when I look at this primary, I am very concerned about how far to the right people are running, because if I was a Republican, that works well in the primary, but how is Buddy Carter going to come back to the middle in the general election when you're talking about, focus really on transgender folks, which represent a small subpopulation of the populace in Georgia? Even Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene couldn't give you an answer on how many trans folks are actually playing sports in Georgia. That's not going to play well in the primary, in the general election in November of 2026.
And they've won their districts, not statewide. We're going to take a break right here. We'll talk about it more. We'll see you guys on the other side of the break. Plus, panel is back, and we want to talk about another mother who serves the state. That is Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Gentlemen, we left off talking about the difference between how these potential candidates could do in the primaries versus the general. Raul, let's start with you.
Let me start on the Democratic side. I was at the Democratic State Party meeting when they picked Charlie Bailey, and there was so much conversation focusing on bringing back Democratic voters. And that, that's part of the story for both parties is how do you serve those primary voters? Obviously, you need them in the general election, but also helping pick candidates. So
activating the base, in other words.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that was an absolute question. How do you activate Democratic-based voters? On the Republican side, you still do have the distinctly Republican camp, the Republican Party we've recognized for years in Georgia, and then there's still the Trump wing of the party.
Do candidates have a tricky path to walk to both be appealing enough to earn a nomination in the primary, but also be a electable when they're in front of the whole state in a general election?
Certainly they do, and frankly, that's nothing new. It's always been that way to some degree in a primary and then running a general campaign. But I think certainly now it's more true.
Does it get harder? I mean, we hear so much
yeah.
that this is a more partisan era than we've ever seen before.
Absolutely. I think there's going to be a tug of war for those who want to be, a MAGA warrior, as Congressman Carter is saying now. You will definitely see people trying to sort of carve out that voting bloc. But I do think that Republicans have been in control in Georgia for now over 20 years, and I think we would be wise to focus on the track record of the success stories looking over the last 2 decades and stay focused on the reasons why we're in the majority.
Go ahead.
You want to get in here too.
I think that's part of the reason why Governor Kemp took a pass on this race. I think he recognizes that the midterms is not going to be a good year for Republicans, not just in Georgia, but across the country. He has political ambitions beyond being in the U.S. Senate. And then also, I think a lot of times people who have held these executive type of political positions have to weigh whether or not they want to go to a body where they have to build consensus in the ways that you do in the U.S. Senate, as opposed to when you're the governor and you kind of get to make some decisions without having to do that kind of horse trading that is done in Washington, particularly in the Senate. And so I think he took a pass on that because, Trump's poll numbers took a 10-point dive from January to now. And I don't see them getting any better, because if the focus is going to be on trans kids in sports, and they can't tell us how many trans athletes are actually in sports, if the focus is going to be on being loyal to Donald Trump when his poll numbers are not that great in a state that he won, I'm not sure that, this is going to be a good year for Republicans in 2026.
Is that going to be the Democratic strategy, seizing on that?
I would. That would make sense.
And I think it's going to be important where the economy is a year from now. That's because when we see the exit polling data, it was more than 40% of voters were driven by that issue.
Absolutely.
And the recent AJC poll, that is still the #1 issue.
Which is what Republicans in Georgia have done a great job over the last 20 years. Job creation, the economy, public safety. That's a track record.
Donald Trump,
I hate to cut you off here, but this is good because this conversation is going to continue on 11 Alive Plus. Clearly, we have so much to talk about. 11 Alive Plus, that's online. Our show continues just after the break. Stay with us.